Hey folks, welcome back. Today's guest is Dr. Robin Rose. She really hones in on chronic kidney disease, but I think the beauty of this podcast is her personal journey. She lives on the island of Hawaii that is not as well known as the others, called Molokai. And her journey started a long time ago. She had an incredible personal journey that took her to become, she started off in India, kind of as an assistant to a doctor in a fishing village. She then became a nurse practitioner. And then from there, she ended up in med school. And right from the beginning, followed a very unconventional path in her medical practice. I don't think that Dr. Rose was ever a conventional medical doctor. Not with a heart like the one she has. Not that, but conventional medical doctors don't have a heart, but she is really, truly an exceptional human being. She's been a member of my Facebook community for a couple of years now, and is a beautiful, always has beautiful contributions to all of the conversations that we have in there, or many of them anyway. So the topic is chronic kidney disease and her approach and her journey. And we talk about all kinds of different things, both from nutritional strategies. We talk about peptides. We talk about bioregulators. We talk about a lot of stuff. So enjoy the episode and make sure that you send us your comments and questions if you should have any on the other side. Well, from the beautiful place that is Hawaii, I don't actually even know what island you're on, Robin, but I would like to welcome Dr. Robin Rose to the podcast today. What a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I am on Molokai.
Molokai, is that like a little island?
It's a little island. I look out and I see Maui. Most people know about Kalaupapa, the leper colony that was on this island. It's on the north side and very hard to get to. And it's still a very traditional community. It hasn't been overrun like Oahu and Maui.
Nice.
And so, it's about families.
Lovely.
And rodeos and
beautiful. Love it. All right. Now, Dr. Rose, you did not get there in a straight line, however. You are not a native of Hawaii. And we are going to talk about kidney disease today, specifically chronic kidney disease, but this has everything to do with your personal journey. So maybe you could give us a little kind of Coles Notes. Coles Notes is a Canadian thing. I don't know what you guys have in the US, but
Cliff Notes.
Yeah, Cliff Notes of your story and how you got to where you are today, because it's a really good story. I love that story.
Well, I am an elder. I am a 1950 baby, and grew up in New York and New Jersey. Hit the late 60s, full on interested in natural healing. The media shared a lot about the 60s in terms of the maybe less savory things, but many of us really started to look at changing how we take care of our bodies, how we have babies, what we put in our mouths. And I ended up, good fortune let me take a trip around the world when I was 19. And I ended up living in a fishing village in southern India. And young, naive, I hooked up with the village doctor. And he only saw the Hindus, not the Christians.
You're kidding.
And so I was like, wait a minute, what? Jersey girl here. She's like, no. So he started mentoring me.
Oh, wow. So wait, was he a medical doctor or was he an Ayurvedic doctor? So this is not Ayurvedic medicine. This is like conventional Western medicine.
Yeah. So I would go see somebody. I didn't know from nothing, honestly, so nothing. And then I'd go tell him, and he'd tell me, go to the drugstore and buy whatever. So I'd ride my bike to town, go get it, bring it back. And that was the beginning of like, wow, I really like this.
Huh.
And came back to America in utter culture shock
Okay.
and ended up living in a very rural spiritual community in Tennessee, and eventually getting a job as a nurse's aide in the very rural hospital. And I go, this is interesting. And ended up going to nursing school as an undergraduate degree because I had quit college to go travel. And then went and got a nurse practitioner certification with a master's degree, but realized I was not educated. And it was a good program, but I was being expected to know way more medicine than I had. And I was in my 30s, young enough to say, I ended up going to med school.
Wow.
And I really thought of going to naturopathic school because my sensibilities were well matched by the attention of the intelligence of the body and engaging in nature first as the way we heal. But I hooked up with Andrew Weil, who also was in Tucson. And I tell the story as he grabbed hold of my wrist and started twisting and said, "We need more people like you in medicine." So I did it.
Wow.
And it was an interesting ordeal. I mean, my story was a bit different in medicine because I had a spouse who died of leukemia while I was in med school.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
It made life different. It's like what appealed to me. I didn't get involved with a lot of the crazy youthful med student goofiness because I had a spouse who was dying.
Yeah.
And
you were a bit older than most of them, right?
Yeah, I was older. And so I actually, because I was a clinician already, I was an attending for med students when I was a med student in my nurse practitioner clinic, which was a country clinic outside of Tucson. And so eventually I just started looking up, like, what herbs would I use for this? What nutritional things? And in my notes, I'd add things because I already had known a lot of this stuff. People would borrow my notes and go, "Wow, they talked about this in class."
I really need to go to class.
It's like,
so you were kind of like a functional kind of non-allopathic medical doctor before you were even a doctor. Like you kind of came into it with your own flavor, if you will, of medicine.
Absolutely. I mean, and there were a lot of us at that time. It was amorphous. Now, we have, I hung out with Jeff Bland before he called it anything. I had a tropism for these people and was on the board of the American Holistic Medical Association, the AHMA, as a first-year med student. So I surrounded myself with the likes of Bernie Siegel, Patch Adams, Bill Manahan. I mean, people we know a lot now. Chris Northrup was the president at one point on the board, and so I did a residency in Santa Rosa, California, where I was actually able to study acupuncture and use it in the hospital. I'd get paid to put needles in a patient laboring who was stuck. It was cool.
That's amazing. I thought they only did that in China or in Australia. I heard they do it in Australia.
It wasn't a lot, but I was needling patients in the hospital. That's and amazing. Nobody was telling me not to. And, putting magnesium in IVs. I mean, I was very allopathic and glad because the training is useful, but I was still, doing other stuff. I mean, we had a homeopathy clinic in our residency. It was kind of cool. And we studied some osteopathic stuff and, it was good. And then I ended up going to Ashland, Oregon, and my first job was so conventional. It was actually very challenging for me. They were very unkind to me and patients. It was alarming. And as luck would have it, I began working with David Jones, who is a big IFM old timer and, a good old time friend of Jeff Bland. And so that got me started in how to engage in a primary care practice in that way, shuffling people through, but they're not walking out with pills,
right?
With wisdom and then I bought 2,000, 3,000 square foot building. Part of it I lived in, part of it I renovated. It was an old antique house with antiques in my exam rooms. I wanted it to feel like when you went for a massage.
Nice.
So it was lavender it smelled good and it was pretty. And I would go out in my garden and come in with stuff. You need to put this in your bath, and so I was really lucky in a community in Ashland, Oregon, to be embraced as a doctor who wanted people to engage in a natural lifestyle. I taught belly dance for women over 40. So
my God, that's hilarious. But you know what? I would say that community was pretty lucky to have you. I mean, they must have been heartbroken when you left.
I still have, patients who are, we talk online. I'm still offering some guidance here and there.
I'll bet.
It was a sad story because my practice got embezzled. And This woman was going around embezzling holistic doctors, was ripping them off. And it was like too much for me because the system did not support me.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge amount. And they dropped me like a hot potato when a bank got a $5,000 theft. And I had to hire forensic accountants and went through a lot of ordeal.
Soul crushing. Yeah.
Was part of the next chapter of my life in terms of planting stress pavers. I had a lot of things to deal with and it just was overwhelming. And it saddened me that we don't support each other in the way that I needed at the time. My patients did. I mean, and the woman ended up with a 3-month in-house sentence
for embezzling a medical practice.
Enormous amount, hundreds of thousands of dollars over time.
Wow.
And she had anyway, neither here nor there because I am fine.
Well, and it's everything gets you to where you are today, right? So
exactly. And so, so my story kind of kept going. I got bored, started another practice, and then met my husband and decided enough was enough, and ended up escorting both of my parents to their death, which was beautiful. I lived with them and it was such a blessing. And at that point, I was ready to travel. And we ended up in Molokai. And I ended up getting a viral infection and essentially never really getting better. And my story was I had a very rare kidney tumor. Went back to Oregon from Molokai to PAC and was having blood pressure spikes and wasn't getting very much like, oh, well, here's a blood pressure pill kind of attitude. And I'm like, wait a minute, the story is more complicated than here's a pill. And I demanded a scan and had a nephrectomy because I felt very clear about wanting this removed. And 3 months later, when I went back for follow-up, I was found to have the very bottom of stage 3 chronic kidney disease. And as a family physician, I realized that I really wasn't that skilled to guide my own self. What do I do now? Okay, I already was pretty clean in the diet, but all right, let me tune up my protein or blah, blah, blah. But I really didn't know. Yeah. And I discovered that my colleagues didn't know either. And when I would see kidney specialists, they would basically say, don't worry about it. And I'm like, I don't feel good. What do you mean, don't worry about it? It's like, I'm supposed to feel better than this, and I don't. And so I started deep diving. Yeah. Because I had an array of abnormal labs and I wanted to be the specialist for myself. And I gratefully discovered Jenna Henderson, who's a naturopath, who guided me to diet and supplements and meditation and, blah, blah, blah. There's a huge lifestyle component to CKD that works. But what I found was that we don't recognize chronic kidney disease until the only lab that we really use much, the glomerular filtration rate, GFR, is based on creatinine, which isn't that accurate, which sideline, by the way, when creatinine just begins to rise, we've already lost 20%.
Wow.
That's important to realize. So the GFR of 60 represents 50% loss already. That's a huge deal. I mean, we don't accept 50% loss of muscles, of brain, of heart. This is a huge deal. And so I came to, in essence, over many years, essentially become an expert in early kidney disease. It's become an expertise. I see it as a portal. I enter into whatever I'm learning. How does it influence kidney? And I had a really lovely conversation the other day with Regan Archibald, who is an acupuncturist. And what we were talking about is in Chinese medicine, kidney is like the portal for life. It's generativity.
Yes.
It is a root cause of illness. And so here we are in, quote, conventional medicine, neglecting 50%. And then, it's close enough to normal. Don't worry until you're a GFR 30, when nephrology begins to really take interest. And that's 25% function.
Well, and if you're a GFR 60, you're heading to GFR 30.
Exactly.
Like you're not going to stay at GFR 60 indefinitely, right? Like you're whatever disease process is taking place is now progressing. And so you're essentially being sent home to progress until you've progressed far enough that they finally have something for you. Yeah.
And, and I've had that entertained to me. My stance was, I am old enough that I either make this work or that's been a great life.
Right.
And by the way, just to speed ahead, I've gotten way better. Just in case I get stuck in the bad part of the story, it's not a bad part of the story.
You're not getting stuck in the bad part. We're going to keep moving through because we want to get to that place where people take something away from this that is,
Absolutely. And when you find out about this, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I see this a lot. I chat with a lot of people who have just been diagnosed. And what I discovered is we know a lot. We don't do it. We're in total neglect. And there's a lifestyle plan that I think is healthy for almost everybody. But once kidney function decreases at all, it's a lifetime risk. If somebody has like a acute episode and they have serious kidney issue and it gets better, they're still at risk. That's a vulnerability. And there's so much we don't know. But, basically my lifestyle plan is very available to all of us. Learning about kidney diet is a bit of a steep curve. It's different for everybody. So you have to know your own labs. And yet, in my mind, toxins are the big deal.
Right. Because next to the liver, the kidneys are the big filters in the system.
Absolutely. And,
right? Just in their own way. Like,
think about tubules.
Yeah. Like tiny little delicate, like I've always thought of kidneys kind of like lungs, right? There's very delicate structures that are so finely tuned and yet can be so susceptible to damage because they're delicate and yet expected to carry this massive load.
Absolutely.
Responsibility.
And we're not, as a conventional community, acknowledging environmental toxins, dietary toxins. It's just not hardly part of the conversation, even though we know heavy metals damage the tubules. And here's another piece of this. Mostly we focus on glomerulus. Oh, because we have the GFR. Okay, guess what? It's tubules that get damaged first.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have markers for that. Glyphosate damages tubules. I don't want to eat that. And there's specifics like potassium elevation It's a tubule issue. Phosphorus elevation. You find these things on labs. It's a tubule issue. So you have to know to protect yourself. And self-protection. I did a paper on self-preservation that's innate in the human. It comes with infant reflexes.
Mm-hmm.
And the paper, which I wrote in the 80s, was what happens that people lose the self-protective innate nature. And with kidney disease, it's like, you got to do it. You have
Well,
I
think it's ignorance, right? People we're not taught how to care for this body. We really aren't. And because I think we become so disconnected from our physical body in so many different ways, and I think part of it also is because the body has this incredible capacity to deal with all the shit we throw at it, pardon my language, people. We get lulled into this false sense of security thinking that, oh, we're fine. I can just eat this. I can just do this. I'm fine. But what we don't realize, and what you're alluding to here, is the damage that's happening under the hood progressively year after year after year. And by the time it shows up,
it's a big deal.
It's become a big deal, right? So Robin, what are the labs that people should look at? I mean, obviously there's your GFR, which you're going to get from your conventional doc, and
the conventional labs are incredibly helpful.
Okay, so what is it that people are looking for?
So you get a CBC, and you want to look at all of those indices. Anemia happens later in CKD, but there are people in earlier CKD who become anemic, and it's
why? How is anemia related to CKD?
Because EPO is made in the kidney. And so,
of course,
a lot of things the kidney does way more than just filter.
Yeah.
Honestly, pleomorphic little gizmo. And
we were talking about melatonin also, right?
Yeah. A lot of things. Vitamin D.
Yes. It's a major stop in the kidney.
And so, and I have this ongoing discussion about, is 25 hydroxy D or 125 dihydroxy D the appropriate test for CKD?
Yeah.
I believe that it's the 125 because the 25 is made in the liver, and that may look fine.
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting, I'm sure you know this, like there's in our genetics, like I know that my enzyme to clear the 125 is actually downregulated. So my 125 status is not reflected in my 25-OH. So my 25-OH can be low, but my 125 might be fine because it's getting backed up, but I don't know that. And so I keep getting told, well, take more D3, because nobody's measuring my 125. And a lot of people are in this boat. Like I'm not the only one. Right. And it's, I think the 125 test costs, I don't know, $50, $60.
Yeah. And it's not covered apparently by insurance.
No, so, but it's a good place to spend your money. It's a few trips to Starbucks that you'll have to skip, but maybe 3. Today's prices.
Exactly. No, thanks. But, so CBC is helpful. A metabolic panel, the usual panel has so much.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know what your glucose is. Diabetes either exists and causes kidney, or kidney causes insulin resistance and diabetes. That gives you, let's start being smart. Pretend I have diabetes and eat like that. Cut out sugar, please. And so, the creatinine is on there.
Yeah.
Some labs will put a GFR, but maybe not. You have to order it separately. You also have to order phosphorus separately, and it's a very important piece of this. But, liver functions are useful. The CO2 is a big deal with kidney disease. It's only one moment in time, but CO2 basically is bicarb. And bicarb gets low in kidney disease, and metabolic acidosis does happen in stage 3. I've seen it so often, and it's ignored. And it's like my story. I'm like plant crazy. I grow them, I eat them, I ferment them, but I still was a little bit too acidic despite all that, because the slope with kidney, you might be doing everything right, you're going to need a few more tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I told this story, I went to the local thrift store and a brand new bottle of like 1,000 bicarb tablets was there for very cheap. It wasn't even opened and it wasn't expired. And I took this as a message from God, started taking, bicarb. My potassium normalized, my uric acid normalized, my PTH normalized, and my phosphorus normalized.
And so how much bicarb? You just start your day with it, right? In the morning?
I actually do it at night.
Oh, you do it at night?
I don't know why, because I'm not awake in the morning too well. And so
all right, well, whatever. So just like a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon? Or
half a teaspoon works.
In water?
It's good. I mean, the pills are a little bit less and it worked for me. I also got some magnesium citrate that I cook with, because citrate's another thing that alkalinizes. And most people are magnesium deficient.
Yeah.
Severely ill kidney patients really ought to get monitored for their magnesium. I think everybody should anyway, but so that's one that many conventional docs don't do. And you really want an RBC, not just a serum. That doesn't really help you know what to do. So, so those labs are important. A urinalysis, a basic urinalysis will tell you a lot. The fact that some people spill protein is an enormous issue.
Yeah.
Right there, that tells you have kidney disease and you need to change your diet, lower your salt, and lower your protein.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're in a phase of like a lot of carnivore issue and people pumping the protein. And if you have kidney disease, you do not want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. There's been a lot of study. Some people will say 0.6 grams of protein per kilogram.
Yeah,
which is
body weight.
Low.
Yeah.
I think 0.6 to 0.8 is reasonable, and even reasonable for most people. Even.
It depends, right? It depends on your lifestyle. If you're an Uber athlete, you might need a little bit more, but
exactly. Or if somebody's wasting, then
you've got sarcopenia. Yeah, exactly.
But still, it's like start with what would be, so I got myself on chronometer and I got a scale. It was a pain in the rear.
I love chronometer.
And how do you make soup and measure what you put in there? But it is critical. Yeah. And that's a take home, is get going with chronometer. Who knows how much selenium they're taking? There's so many things on there. Like, do you know what your day's fatty acids look like? It's free and it's brilliant. And then you can kind of start doing your own personal fine-tuning hack. My potassium was elevated. I quit eating foods that were high in potassium and found, okay, I can eat eggplant and arugula. They're great, and then gradually as I improved, I've even been eating some white potatoes thrown in a soup.
So there, maybe the odd banana here and there.
And slices of banana.
But you said that the bicarb helps to normalize a lot of these things. And I think
that's why I'm able now. And I wasn't at the beginning, and nobody told me to do it.
Yeah, that's such an important point, though, because we'll talk about the heavy metals in a minute as well. And that is that when we're talking about the body and something being elevated or something being low, what gets lost in that conversation is that nothing in the body exists in isolation, and it's always being balanced out by something else. There's always a ratio, or there's a teeter-totter at play. And if we just try to, even like omega-3 and omega-6, right? We tell people your omega-6 is too high. And so they start cutting the omega-6, but part of the solution is also increase the omega-3. And so just like you can't correct the ratio just by eating more omega-3, you can't correct the ratio without also reducing the omega-6.
Really? Yeah.
And I think when you're talking about phosphorus or potassium or anything, it's what are the other minerals? What are the other factors that would balance this out so that you don't make yourself absolutely bonkers trying to remove it in every single food that you eat?
You can't. And that's really allopathic to think of it that way. Potassium, let's smack potassium. One of the people, I had a patient group, a kidney group on Facebook, and one wonderful woman I love dearly, basically was like, I hate potassium. It's evil. And I'm like, no, you don't.
You need
get
it.
dead without it. We're talking balance. And I love the term hormesis because, some things that go wrong are actually adaptations to deal.
Yeah.
So is it wrong? Maybe, I need that. But if I fix my other things, my 12-step program includes fix your sleep, fix your hydration, fix your stress, get rid of toxins everywhere in your life, including people.
Yeah.
Seriously, learn how to study. There's a lot of these strategies. What are you doing to have fun? What are you doing in your prayerful meditative place? Because that's going to change the autonomic aspect. It's an autonomic disease. All of these things. And so I went about discovering nutrient supplements, everything supplements, and have long lists of things. In fact, I take quite a few things. I vary them by the day. The whole redox thing with NAD is a huge piece to this. Fatigue is enormous with kidney disease. I mean, almost everybody says they have it. The tubules have the highest level of mitochondria than pretty much any other part of the body. And so mitochondrial wisdom. Yeah. There are so many transporters. There's so much going on. I mean, I call kidney disease an illness of discernment. It's Raja Yoga. At every moment, those tubules are having to decide what to keep and what to get rid of. And toxins and oxalates are damaging them. And so it's like, we want these. And tubules, think of tubules like the small intestine. Similar role, this discernment. What do I keep? And so I looked at that as a meditative analogy in my whole life, my own thoughts, how I hold my body. Heart rate variability, all of these things that we know. You can look it up, and it does affect kidney because kidney is degenerative, and it affects absolutely every part of the body. I mean, everything I've looked up, the left nostril, you can find what CKD does to it. I mean,
come on.
And yet everybody has a little different collage with what they have. So as a clinician, as a patient as well, you just have to look at what array do I have and how do I deal with it? What are my priorities? What aren't I good at? I have times where I'm like, wah, 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 and I don't exercise enough. So it's like, okay, I'm getting it together.
Yeah.
Come on, you can do this. I'm my own cheerleader. I need to be hydrating better. And so each of us has to go through this, like honestly learn what are the things and then what to do. And truth be told, I found that once one engages in all of this stuff, and it's not a little amount, it's not trivial, it's optional, but then I don't really want to have somebody tell me I need dialysis. I'm committed, and that commitment works. As I told you before, I renamed early kidney disease renology, which is the art and science of kidney success.
Love it.
Turning vicious cycles into precious cycles. It takes motivation. And when I found peptides,
I was about to bring those up. I was so happy you did.
Oh my God. I mean, it's like all of the things that I'd been doing, they worked. I mean, for people who are listening, I started out with a GFR of 30 with one kidney, feeling like a piece of dog poop. I didn't feel good. Started working on all this stuff. I mean, and I live in paradise. I was there, with a machete. I didn't feel good. And as I started learning stuff, I got it up to like 36. I was like, yeah, I'm better. And then it kind of cruised into the 40s. It's very slow. And that's the thing. Slow it down means I had to slow everything about myself down. Slow down. And that takes time. All these dietary changes, they take time. You don't want to start when you're really sick. Early on, you can kind of like, what do I need to do? What shifts do I need to do? Okay, I got myself up to 51.
Wow.
I love that. Started doing peptides. I just did labs and it was 57.
Wow.
And I haven't yet started with bioregulators except for epitalin. And so I have basically taken all of this groundwork that I've done and, turned it into like, what are the concepts that a non-conventional mind could use?
Yeah.
Inflammation is, everybody with kidney disease has inflammation and oxidative stress.
Yeah.
Okay, we know plenty about that. And peptides take everything you're doing. I heard somebody yesterday say basically peptides without nutrition don't work. I love that. I mean, I don't think it's 100% true, but I like the idea. In other words, don't just take a pill.
I think, yeah, exactly. I think the sentiment behind that is, don't just think you're going to keep living your crappy lifestyle, eating your crappy diet and use the peptide and have everything fall into place. But, the rock star, one of the rock stars for kidneys, which this is a peptide that never ceases to amaze me. Because I often refer to it as the Model T Ford of the peptide world, because it's almost like no matter what you're talking about, it comes up. And that's our friend BPC 157 seems to,
oh my God,
is magic.
The array is insane. I mean, I took Bill Seed's book and went through it and noted everything about kidney. I mean, and BPC, which was, I started with BPC because my nitric oxide was just stuck. It wouldn't get up. Everybody with CKD needs to be taking Berkeley Life Pro.
I know I have an episode coming up with them.
And arugula, and it still may not go up. Well, BPC does that. And that was my portal to discover the array. I mean, first of all, CKD is a dysbiotic condition. Just know that. The tight junctions get damaged by uremic toxins that end up in the bowel. They slip on in and cause inflammatory changes and systemic inflammation that damages kidney. Another vicious cycle. And so right away, go get your dysbiosis dealt with.
Yeah.
And ferment your food and eat it every day with every meal. Have fermented food. That way, maybe you need the pills, maybe you don't. And so BPC is like a glorious gift to all GI everything, from dysbiosis and SIBO and, also stomach acid in CKD is a huge thing because already there's nutrient aberrations and transporter abnormalities that make even what you eat, it's not getting where it needs to go. And yet BPC will assist that.
Right. Well, and taking digestive enzymes and HCl with
absolutely
is a big thing too, right? And I would imagine that betaine HCl with that animal protein when you are eating it is, again, it's going to help. It's going to help to break that stuff down so that your body can at least absorb more of it. But we know that there's so much nitrogen waste with protein, which is, it's one of the reasons why we were talking about the essential amino acids earlier and how they may play a role in helping people with CKD to bump up their protein intake without actually eating protein. But I'm going to introduce
and nitrogen is one piece of the animal protein, but the phosphorus issue gets neglected. It actually gets like minimized and ridiculed, which I don't understand, because phosphorus in kidney disease is part of why bones lose density and arteries gain calcification.
That's crazy.
Absolutely horrible. And early on, even in stage 2, it's beginning. And it's ignored. FGF23 is a lab that does start going up in stage 2. And so here's what I found out, because my phosphorus was elevated and now my bones are, over the years of figuring this out, I have accumulated damage that I am looking to fix. The phosphorus in animal foods is absorbed about 80%. The phosphorus in plant foods is bound as a phytate and is absorbed about 40%.
Interesting.
So that's an issue. I mean, I have an unfortunate piece of my story is the urologist who did my cancer surgery left me with a damaged distal bowel. I cannot take binders. I get obstipation. It's absolutely ridiculous. And to fix it, I mean, it's way better. It's way better with some, body work and various tools. But most people don't have this problem and can use binders. Chitosan and bentonite will swab up uremic toxins as well as phosphorus.
No kidding.
And alkalinize, and then it's less of a problem. And then you can eat more optimally, like, red meat for kidney, sometimes. I know some people eat way too much, and I think it's just too much for a kidney system. On the other hand, I don't think you have to eat none.
You're right. You don't have to go vegan. Yeah.
One of the things that I discovered that I loved, I learned this very early on, is Acacia senegal is from a particular acacia tree, and it's the sap that they dry. You can get it as a powder. Heather's tummy fiber. It is an incredible swab of creatinine and toxins in the bowel. It is a stimulus for butyrate, which does get low in CKD.
Yeah.
And so you end up having, that's a tool. Start low, 1 teaspoon a day, gradually increase to 5. You got to hydrate or you end up with cement.
Yeah. Like so many binders, actually.
Yeah. So the hydration piece of kidney disease is obvious. And some people can overhydrate. So there's a hormesis for everything.
What about electrolytes?
It all
because
depends.
There's sodium in electrolytes, right? And so can that be an issue for kidney disease?
Yeah, I think lowering sodium is wise in kidney disease. That doesn't mean eliminate it. Some people overdo it.
Yeah.
You need a couple.
You need some.
But and again, it's personal.
But I wonder if taking electrolytes and not salting your food, for example, if you or minimizing salt on your food, if you were using electrolytes where, again, we're bringing the sodium to the body in conjunction with many of the other minerals that hopefully will balance it.
Sure. Yeah.
Might be a better way.
There's still things that are on my deep dive list.
Yeah.
Talking to you is really helpful because it's like everybody I talk to got, I want to know this, and so I'm interested to teach rhenology to our primary care mind, to all of us, because it's really a different approach to kidney. And Chinese medicine teaches that kidney is fear, that the emotion of fear works with kidney. And it's huge. I mean, I've had to dance with fear so much, so interesting. And yet to overcome that, to gain control, to empower yourself overcomes the fear so that, the mind-body part of kidney disease is not optional.
No.
Meditative time is critical. And, there are some people who say a little bit of alcohol is useful. I'm not so convinced, but, whatever the strategy, there are
alcohol.
Yeah.
Really?
Teeny bits.
Yeah.
I'm not a drinker, so I don't do that. I do other things that help you relax and think that they're very helpful for kidney, but I prefer not to talk about it on this. You can use your imagination. I think that there are gizmos these days that are very helpful. Get an Oura ring. You took mine off. The heart rate variability thing.
I think the heart rate variability monitor, the heart math HRV, is such a great little tool, and it's not that expensive, and it really teaches you to self-regulate. I think it's it's very much overlooked so often for the fancier, shinier stuff.
Right. And these are all real medical treatments for
Mhm.
early kidney disease. I mean, not to go, well, I don't know about this. Yeah, I have data that could validate why you want to do this. I don't need all the data. It's so clear and obvious. It's like we really can turn this around.
Yeah, no kidding.
But not unlike the other pandemic, because kidney disease is a real pandemic, and early bird kidney, like early bird the other thing, will actually turn it around. But if we wait until GFR 60, it's harder.
Yeah.
It is. It's crazy.
So on the peptide front, so you talked about BPC 157, which is, a superstar for kidney. What about something like, and I'm just throwing stuff out. You're the one that you're the expert in this, but what about something like KPV to help to manage inflammation, or thymosin alpha 1 would be another one?
I'm trying to figure out, how do you enter? We all have different ways that we like entering with peptides. And I tend to be a BPC enter.
Oh, for me too. Like
I've heard other people say, use like CJC as
CJC causes a lot of problems. I actually think if not BPC, then TA1, as long as
and I actually think those two together.
Yeah.
And maybe even adding TB4, which I have a question about the frag versus the whole TB4, but that's another conversation. But, fibrosis is the end of the line with kidney disease, right, no matter what the cause.
Yeah.
And so much of what peptides do interfere at various levels of that pathway to getting, because everybody's route in unique.
Yeah.
And there's an array. I don't think of these things as comorbidities. I think it's part of the syndrome.
Yeah. Well, it's all part of the same.
So definitely. And as I told you, I'm a notebook freak. And so, I've gone through fibrosis, TB4.
Yeah.
Eye disease is something with kidney, believe it or not.
Well, it's because it's vascular, right? It's all going to be affected by the same thing. And this is where we come to our friends, the bioregulators, and where, I know this is your next frontier in chronic kidney disease in terms of your deep dives, but
we'll do another talk when I have those all together.
Yeah, but we have a bioregulator for the blood vessels. We have a bioregulator for the kidneys. We have a bioregulator for the heart, which is, in my mind, part of that whole system. Like they're
absolutely
right.
There's no doubt. The brain, heart, and kidney are one organ.
Yeah, like they're part of that.
To different neighborhoods.
That system.
There's such similarities, and the influences aren't separate. So cardiorenal is so real.
Exactly.
It's so real that, like we talked about before, mostly when people are in stage 3, they die of heart disease.
Because it kills them first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is not funny at all. Well, and then the cartilage one, which we don't talk about nearly enough, right? People think the cartilage bioregulator, it's for the joints. And it's like, yeah, except for the part where, collagen and elastin are so critical to the heart and the kidney. Guess what?
The whole actin thing with TB4 is very interesting. I have a bunch of that I need to put together. But my list, the bone, that's when maybe mess around a little bit with the growth hormone class.
Yeah, the growth hormone secretagogues.
PA65 helps with bone, I have found out. IL-6, that whole inflammatory thing. There are, I'm putting all these together. C-Lank lowers IL-6, and anxiety and the autonomic aggravation that CKD causes is huge. Everybody says, I'm nervous, I'm scared. It's not an emotional thing, it's chemical.
Physical, yeah.
And so, what's anxiety? My mom actually had kidney disease. She had a renal artery stenosis and was totally mismanaged. It was terrible when I think back about it. And she had enormous anxiety, and they just kept dumping drugs on her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, she's hypoxic. She has congestive heart failure.
And that makes you anxious. Your brain is going to...
Anxiety is a good thing. It's telling you something's going on. Pay attention. Don't just shoved Valium on top of it and ignored the congestive failure, which she died from. But anyway, I mean, we have so many tools. Hypertension is a huge one. DSIP, BCP, tesamorelin, and TA65. We have some choices. I mean, there's so many benefits. I mean, I found carnosine is an ACE inhibitor.
ACE inhibitor.
ACE inhibitor. Are you kidding me? I think carnosine is another. The tiny ones with kidney are wonderful.
Right.
And so, I mean, I
what
like
about GHK. Have you looked at that in kidney? Because it has so many wide-ranging benefits.
And it's another one of the little ones.
Little tiny one, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It isn't my first rung.
No.
So I think cycling these makes a lot of sense. It's like do some labs, figure out what's calling right now, because it's going to change.
Yeah.
Right? Every time you do labs, it's like, okay, we have a new adventure.
What's come up now? And you talked earlier about also how kidney disease is very much a disease of mitochondria, right?
Profoundly so. In fact, the tubules, which is where the action is a huge mitochondrial
reserve. Yeah.
And so MOTS and SS31 are wonderful.
Interesting. Because I always think of MOTS-C as more of a skeletal muscle kind of.
I know. And realizing that skeletal muscle and kidney have an association. I mean, sure. Wasting is very common. Even somebody who looks normal, if you get a DEXA, their muscles are smaller and their fat is bigger. And so some of the peptides that actually work at that level to not make fat, but to actually, make muscle and cartilage tissue, that's something that's very appealing with peptides. It's like all the efforts you put in, it's like it kind of like, gets the lawnmower going,
right.
You're all ready.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I love all of these. Epitalin, I think, is a wonderful, like a kind of like bring hormesis together. It's such an array, and we know that premature aging is kidney disease. Whatever it is, it's accelerated. I mean, my hair grayed, my skin changed way faster. I mean, okay, I'm 70. I love saying that. I'm like, really?
You look fantastic. I don't know.
My telomere length and it made me look like a 50-year-old.
Good. That's what you're looking for, right?
Exactly. And that vitality is possible by all the lifestyle stuff, and have fun, stop reading the news, and adding these lovely tools to really just go, okay, you can go now. I love the idea of messaging, signaling.
Mm-hmm.
And I meditate on this. I mean, I'll do peptides and actually envision that there's messaging going on. I mean, it's really curious stuff. I could feel the change in my brain with epitalin.
Yeah, well, it's a powerful. People have said to me a couple of times, if you could only have one, what would it be? And I think for me, it would be epitalin, because it's as far upstream as you can get. It's a master endocrine regulator. There's so many downstream effects from that one little 4 amino acid chain that it would be the chosen child. So Miss Dr. Robin Rose, when's the book coming out? Because we're all sitting here listening to this going, this is amazing. And there's some great information here, but I know that you're very focused on training and teaching other physicians and practitioners in terms of everything that you've really worked for. I mean, you said 2013 is when you got your first diagnosis of your own CKD, starting with the tumor. And then, as you had said to me, once you have one kidney, you automatically are kind of on that path. Yeah. So So what's your next step? Because I know that, like, again, like you're training other physicians, or at least working to educate them.
Right.
Are you going to write that book? I think you need to write the book.
I know I need to write that book. And I wasn't really sure what I was putting together.
I think it's a book.
Until I found peptides.
Yeah.
And now I know. Rhenology peptides.
Yeah.
And again, I the lead up to using the peptides is as important as using the peptides. And
For sure.
I really want to put it together as a peptide guide, because all of those things, like I could talk about mitochondrial issues. Well, okay, get tested, take your CoQ, it's low in CKD, of course. And yet, you're not quite there. Start some peptides.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you could be, if you saw a CKD patient, if you are the CKD patient, you could start with BPC, no brainer. You can get it orally, if you want to be brave and inject it, that's good. Another one that I'm looking into that I resisted at first, I was like, no, is Pentosan.
Oh, Pentosan polysulfate? Really?
I resisted it. I mean, I did a consult with a peptide physician, and it was absolutely a very bad experience.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate. But the recommendation included Pentosan with no education. That was part of it. I'm like, that's a drug for, I'm not going to take that stuff. And in time, I was ready to research it. And, there's a lot of tools that we have. That wouldn't be my first tool, but if you have somebody who's stuck, there's value, and so here's my book. Maybe I could just publish this with my messy notes. Be easier.
I think you could find someone to help you with that. So I want to help.
If anybody listening, if you want to be my assistant, get in touch with me. I need help.
But I think that, there's a few things that I've pulled out of our conversation that I think are good takeaways for people. And that is that, certain supplements that people really need to watch is obviously the magnesium, but the CoQ10, nitric oxide we talked about earlier, and there's different ways of increasing nitric oxide. And one of them as simple as taping your mouth shut at night, which, people look at you like you're crazy when you talk about it, including your husband, for example, like my husband. And I assure him it's going to make everything better. He doesn't even have CKD, but I'm promising him that, there's all these amazing magical things are going to happen because it increases your nitric oxide production. But things like watching homocysteine is another one. People don't think of homocysteine in kidneys. And then something as simple as half a teaspoon of baking soda and water once a day. And frankly, you don't even need to have chronic kidney disease, which is CKD, guys, in case we didn't say this earlier, to benefit from that baking soda, just to alkalize the system or help the body to maintain its balance, its pH balance. Because
even if you're doing an impeccable alkaline diet with kidney disease, in some cases, it still is very difficult to stay alkaline enough to be protective.
Right. Okay. And then what else was there? Omega.
I think some people might want to get SNP tests, look
genetic tests.
Yeah. And then, that there's supplementing to do. There are some really lovely renal dietitians who are functional, who are looking into genomics. And I think that's going to add a lot. A good multivitamin can be a good thing. There are a few things to be careful about, to watch out for. That'll all be in the book. But
the phosphorus you talked about.
Phosphorus is a huge deal to me. And unfortunately, most of the conventional nephrology hasn't really embraced the importance of it. But, when phosphorus is even in the normal range, it can start taking calcium from the bones, which is not good, and putting it in the blood vessels, which is terrible, which is demise.
Yeah.
The end of the line kind of thing. And so by changing to more plant-based protein, you're getting a lot less phosphorus absorbed, using scents with binders, and clay and that kind of thing. But, it's doable.
Yeah, it sure looks like it is.
I take a lot of stuff. I take NAC, I take ALA, I take low dose lithium. I don't even remember anymore. NAD. TUDCA is a lovely one because there's every organ is affected by kidney, and gallbladder secretion can be sluggish, and everything gut is kidney, and so there's every reason to be aware. And maybe you personally don't have that problem, but you might, and
you can prevent
all
it
of it at once.
And you can even you may be able to slow things down or prevent it before it becomes an issue, because from the sounds of it, it's so, it seems to be much more, if we believe that CKD really begins at much higher levels of GFR than what's being recognized, then it's like anything else, right? It's just this progression of disease that doesn't get recognized until it's really far down the road. So if you started to do some of these things preventatively, could you potentially just...
I have seen it happen repeatedly.
Yeah.
The classic where the person goes back to the doctor and said, oh, well, the diagnosis was wrong.
All right. I'll take it.
Okay, fine.
If that makes you feel good, I'm good with that. That's all good. All right, Ms. Robin. So how do people get in touch with you? Do they get in touch with you? I know that you're a one-woman show right now. So we're going to ask our listeners, for those of you who really desperately want to connect with you, I think, do you want to talk a little bit about the Facebook community that you have, or is there another way that people can?
Sure. I started with a Facebook group for patients, and I think I blew them away with science.
Oh, well, yeah, it can happen.
I overdid the studies, and people were like, nobody said anything. And then I decided what I really needed to do was be talking to clinicians, because you tell somebody, go talk to your doctor. The doctor doesn't know. Don't worry. That wasn't a good cycle. And so I have now what I'm calling a functional kidney group.
Okay.
And what that means, and it's for clinicians.
Okay.
It's not for patients at this point, because what I want is, let us begin a discussion. What are we doing? And honestly, I think I'm blowing them away with the science. I find
that's all right. They can handle it.
Gorgeous papers. I mean, there's so much available. And so people can find me, private message me on Facebook. I'm a slowpoke, but I can get it. And I am heavy. And I could be emailed, but like you say, I'm a one girl show at the moment. And so I might be a slow responder, but I'm happy for you to put my email in the
show notes.
Okay. And if you want, I can say it. It's Doc Bina, DOC BINAH. Bina is a Kabbalah term for the supernal mother.
Oh, nice. So BIN like November, AH
at gmail.com.
Beautiful. Yeah. Amazing. Well, Dr. Rose, it's been a pleasure. I really love this conversation. So thank you so much.
I agree. This is a bit of a maiden journey for me in starting to publicly talk about Rhenology Peptides. And honestly, how you do what you do is so pristine and beautiful. And so thank you for being my maiden voyage on really saying we can do this.
Thank you. Well, thank you for choosing me. I think you're doing amazing work, and it's really important. So I can't wait to be get you back here when you're going to be telling people about your book and when it's coming out and what the name of it is. It's going to have Renology in there somewhere. And,
Yay.
and hopefully it won't be too long.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yay. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.